Very good. So this morning we are going to look at 1 Samuel chapter 1 verses 1 through 10. Now, interestingly, I found, interesting to me, probably not to you, in 16 years plus 3 years of student ministry, I've never preached on this passage. And it's the passage of Hannah that many of us are familiar with. I've preached a few times on Samuel, the boy in the temple with Eli. Eli, I'm here. Oh, I didn't call you. Go back to sleep. Eli, I'm here. I didn't call you. Go back to sleep. Oh, it must be the Lord calling you. Been on that one, and always kind of incorporated Samuel's story with about his mother Hannah, but never this particular passage. So a good passage as we think about themes of Thanksgiving, perhaps. And also, we'll look at kind of the challenges that are part of this passage too. So we'll be looking at 1 Samuel chapter 1, verse 1 through 20, there in the historical parts of the Old Testament there, as we get started right after the books of law, as we call them. We get to the early history of God's people here. If we encountered a 10-year-old you, what would you have said to the following questions? And feel free to answer either or both. What do you want to do when you grow up? And what will make your life a success?
I can answer that.
Sure, Joyce.
When I was 10 years old, I wanted to be a nurse.
You wanted to be a nurse?
And I never knew anything else. I wanted to be a nurse from day one. And it never varied or never changed. And I thought that was a great gift.
Joyce wanted to be a nurse at 10 years old, and now, just a few years later, she's accomplished her dreams.
That's right.
And has served in that capacity.
I think it's a great gift because so many people struggle with what they want to do.
Not knowing what to do or how to do it is a question many of us struggle with in parts of our lives. To have some sort of a calling, I'll call it, Joyce, even if you wouldn't say that, I think that's a sign of feeling called to a certain profession. And it feels different when you feel like that's what you're supposed to be doing, whatever it is you're doing, right? Yeah, Chris.
At 10 years old, I wanted to be a Roman Catholic nun.
You wanted to be a Roman Catholic nun?
Because all my close friends were Catholic. And I just found the robes and the inside of the church and everything very mysterious.
So the connection to people who were Catholic, but also the kind of the sacred mystery of being inside those places.
Yeah. Obviously, I didn't follow that. My Southern Baptist grandmother had something.
Your
to say
Southern
about
Baptist
that.
grandmother had something to say about being a nun. Okay, that's right. I see that.
When I was 10 years old, I wanted to be a mom and marry a farmer.
Debbie wanted to marry a farmer, well, be a mom and marry a farmer, but maybe not in that order. Maybe
Right,
marry a
yeah,
farmer, be a mom,
sure,
either way,
yeah.
whatever.
Marry a farmer and be a mom. That was,
Okay.
that was it. And as far as the second one, if you asked me at 10 years old, I would have had no idea because I didn't think about success. I just was a kid being happy and.
So didn't really have an idea of what being a success might mean.
Yeah.
Okay.
That time I wanted to be a civil engineer, build things, roads, buildings, bridges, whatever. I did. And I didn't.
Rick wanted to be a civil engineer, and then he did, and then he didn't.
I built a telephone network, so that's kind of what I
Built a telephone network.
decided to do instead. And success, I guess I just wanted to be a good person and then employed and have a family.
Be employed and have a family. That would be a symbol of success for you at 10. I think I would have thought I made it pretty well if I had a house and a car as an adult. I think that would have been, that's kind of, you did pretty well if that's where you are, I think, would have been my perspective. At 10, I wanted to be a veterinarian.
Chris,
Yes, Dick.
I had no idea what I wanted to do. I didn't pick anything except in the conversation, I wanted to climb a telephone and fix them climbing up that tree trunk. So that's very high.
You want it to be a
And
lineman, Dick, to
Yeah.
climb those poles and fix?
I can't
the
sing,
poles?
I can't sing, the song. I am a lineman for the county, but that's what I was thinking of doing. And I wound up as a physical therapist, you can see. So
So you fix the people who fell off the poles.
that's right, yeah.
Boy, I'm always been scared of heights and open spaces combined, so I don't think I could make more than like one rung on that ladder before I stop climbing. But the veterinarian thing, I was sidetracked when I realized I'd have to care for cats. I don't hate cats, I just don't care for them. I've never understood cats, so once I realized not all veterinarians get to be zoo veterinarians, it was kind of like, oh, yeah, I kind of was thinking I like the exotic stuff, and then I realized you had to go to medical school for that, and that was a lot of it. Like, it was a hard field to get into, and I thought I could probably do that, but it's a lot more bar to entry than I realized when I was 10. You know, you just want to take care of animals because you love them, and you think, oh, you need a medical degree to do that. So, we're going to talk a little bit about maybe not what we wanted when we were 10, but a story of Hannah and what drove her, or at least her deep desires that she had as an adult that we're going to hear about. So we're going to break this, recognizing one, the way the story kind of flows, but also that at home it'll be easier if you read small parts. If you're not hearing us read, at least you can follow along just a couple verses at a time. We're going to start by reading just the first 2 verses of the first chapter, 1 Samuel. So we have 2 books of Samuel, 1 Samuel, 2 Samuel. So this is 1 Samuel chapter 1, verse 1 and 2. Would somebody be willing to read that for us?
I think you should, because that has all the words. nobody
Oh,
can-
yes, Rick noticed there's a lot of hard words in this one, so he says he's told me. That's good. Let's try it. Again, with any hard names, especially in the Old Testament, the rule is speak quickly and confidently, and that's all. There was a certain man of Ramathaim, a Zophite from the hill country of Ephraim, whose name was Elkanah, son of Jeraham, son of Eliahu, son of Tohu, son of Zuph, an Ephraimite. He had 2 wives. The name of the one was Hannah, and the name of the other was Peninnah. Peninnah had children, but Hannah had no children. Yeah, that was a good suggestion. I didn't mean to stick anybody with that. Immediately, can we understand about the difficulty Hannah may have faced from her family or culture? Just in these first 2 verses, what strikes you? What stands out to you?
He had no children, and that's kind of the woman's role back then, was to.
She has no children, and that's important for a woman back then, probably, yeah.
She's also the second wife, so it's almost like the first wife can fit in better with the culture because she has all these children. And the second wife sort of can't fulfill her role.
So Chris says she's the second wife, and the first one has children, so it's even worse. Let me say, Chris, we don't know if she's the first or second wife.
Oh, just
Probably she's the first.
Because mine says he has 2 wives, and Hannah's name is first, so I'm assuming.
Right.
So why does that matter? It doesn't in the long run necessarily, but it might help us understand. Polygamy is very much accepted, but it is not the rule back then. And the idea is that you want heirs, and so you're much more likely to marry a second time if your first wife can't have children, or you can't have children with her, or whatever. So that's why, as I read that, I wonder, is Hannah the first wife instead of the second? Which brings all kinds of more things. like maybe we would have been fine if we had children, but we couldn't. So my husband married this other woman. So now her family's part of my family too. So it's always before me. Whereas if you're the second wife, you might say, well, yeah, Elkanah already has descendants, and like that's not like we're already part of this family. But yeah, so I wonder that might play something into it too. Again, not crucial for our understanding, not crucial of knowing who Hannah is, but it might help explain why there was two wives if there weren't any offspring from the first, right? Lots of pressure from the culture. Sorry, go ahead, Chris.
But somebody's version says she is the first wife, correct? Well, she's listed first.
She's just listed first.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Chris,
Yes, Carol.
in the message, he says that Hannah was the first wife.
Okay, so in the message, this kind of a translation into modern language, he says Hannah was the first wife. So I think that, I don't know that there's evidence for that, but I think it's strongly suggested that she is. So Carol, that's interesting that in that translation, it actually says that. So let's move to the next part. Would somebody be willing to read verses 3 through 8? Now we got Shiloh, Phinehas, we got Elkanah and Peninnah. I don't know where that Hophni. Yeah, let's go with Hophni. That sounds good. So those are the names. If you need any help with names, would somebody be willing to read verses 3 through 8 for us? Rick, thank you.
Year after year, this man went up from his town to worship and sacrifice to the Lord Almighty at Shiloh, where Hophni and Phinehas, the two sons of Eli, were priests of the Lord. Whenever the day came for Elkanah to sacrifice, he would give portions of the meat to his wife Peninnah and to all her sons and daughters. But to Hannah he gave a double portion, because he loved her and the Lord had closed her womb. And because the Lord had closed her womb, her rival kept provoking her in order to irritate her. This went on year after year. Whenever Hannah went up to the house of the Lord, her rival provoked her till she wept and would not eat. Elkanah, her husband, would say to her, Hannah, why are you weeping? Why don't you eat? Why are you downhearted? Don't I mean more to you than 10 sons?
Thank you, Rick. So something we should understand, this is before the temple of the Lord is built. Okay, so in this day and age, there's no king. There are tribal leaders. We're around the time of the judges. Samuel is going to be a prophet, priest, and judge. We haven't gotten to him yet. He's not born yet. That's where the story. But where we are, Shiloh is probably about 15 miles from the house where Hannah lives. So if you think about that, we're not going to worship every week. We go to worship in major festivals. So this is the time where we go up. We think that Shiloh is the place where the Ark of the Covenant is held. So we think that's a major worship center for the people. But it's not like the temple. We haven't gotten there yet. But major events, kind of, when there'd be festivals or holy days, that's when people would go to worship here at the, what do they call it, the temple? To go up to the town to worship. It's a sanctuary. We would call it a sanctuary. How does Elkanah treat his wife Peninnah and her children, and how does he treat Hannah?
Well, I think he treats Hannah quite well. I mean, he gives gifts and everything to the second wife, but he seems to care about her feelings.
He seems to treat Hannah well.
And he says, like, say, why make such a fuss over no children? Isn't having me better than having 10 sons? I mean, he's trying to give her, tell her it's not important.
So yeah, isn't our marriage better than having 10 sons? So this kind of thing, like he's trying to say to her, this isn't a problem for me kind of thing, like we can be together without that kind of thing. Yeah, so he tries to comfort her in some ways.
Gives Peninnah and her children kind of what is required, but he gives Hannah more.
So Debbie says he gives Peninnah and her children what's required, but he gives Hannah more, right?
And that, and I think, she's the one that he really loves in that. And so he just,
Like the second wife is a necessity. I
right,
mean, it's something he has to do in order to continue his lineage. But his first wife is really the one he cares
Yeah.
about.
So the second wife is out of necessity. Hannah's more the marriage of love, that kind of thing, perhaps. We think what's going on is that when you offer a Thanksgiving sacrifice, it's sacrificed, and then the priest would give you a great portion of the meat back. So the priest keeps a portion, but gives the family back a lot of the meat. And meat was you didn't eat meat very often. So when you divide it amongst, that's what he divides it among his wife and her children. But then to Hannah, we're not quite sure what the Bible says. My note says meaning of Hebrew uncertain, which is always that's a big one. Like, well, we don't know what this really means, but we think it means that Hannah got a special portion, maybe a double portion, to show that she is favored or at least very revered and well respected here, right? So how is Peninnah described? How does she treat Hannah, and what is the cause of the problem according to the Bible?
treats her as a rival.
Right on Elm and then you
I
go
don't know,
across
they're
there.
jealous
That turns
Um,
in Terry.
because she
Now the chip.
loves love and attention. So she does everything she can to belittle Hannah.
So she wants the attention, it seems like. She treats Hannah as a rival,
Yeah. And demeans her.
demeans her.
Is cruel to her. I think it's fun of her. Not really fun of her, but
It's a competition,
yeah.
right? For her.
A second wife.
Yeah.
But the husband doesn't do anything to stop Peninnah from doing that.
I think he's kind of oblivious to it. Peninnah probably knows when to, right, yeah, he's a guy. No.
Oh, geez, he's a guy. So
No,
the
no.
comment that Elkanah doesn't really know what's going on, or he doesn't do anything to stop
He
it.
does recognize it because he says.
He recognizes that
"Am I
she's
not
her.
better
Yeah.
than the
Yeah.
town sons?" But he doesn't, at least as far as we've read, he doesn't address Peninnah to say, stop doing that.
He doesn't try and put a stop to it.
Right.
He just tries to kind of appeal to him. Yeah. Yeah.
Do you think at that time that was important? I don't think they thought about women like being people.
I think they thought about women being people, Joyce, but yeah, I don't know. I think it would have been highly unusual for a biblical story for the man to get involved into two women's
Right.
relationships,
You know,
yeah.
But he
He was
set
above-
up the
He
mess.
was above that.
Or.
He set up the mess. This is the good, well, Chris, we're gonna take that comment and we're gonna talk about that in a second. He set up the mess. Pat, you had something to say.
Or he has tried to stop Peninnah and nothing's changed, so it's, this
He
is
may
how
have-
she is, and just,
He may have tried his best to mediate the conversation or the dispute and nothing has changed. And he's just like, forget it. I'm just gonna try and be nice to Hannah and hopefully that will help.
Which is why he's giving Hannah the double portions and
Why he's giving her the double portion. Yeah, maybe.
Plus, it sounds like it's been a long time because they got a lot of kids.
It's been a few years, Joyce. She's got a few kids, especially if Hannah's the first wife. She's seen all of this play out over the years, right? If she's the second wife, she came in at some point maybe, but in theory, she's the first wife. So he's the one who got her in this mess, Chris said, which strikes me because what's the cause of the problem according to the Bible? Is it Elkanah?
no.
Hannah.
It's the fact that Hannah can't
Hannah's
bear
barren.
children. And
It's the fact that Hannah can't bear children. What's the cause of that problem?
Oh, yeah.
God closed her womb, says the Bible.
yes,
This is problematic. Because Elkanah did not get her into this mess. God got her into this mess, according to the Bible. I'm not liking that. I'm just saying what the Bible says. We can't, it's just there, right? And this is gonna be what we talk about today, because this is the issue with the text for I would say the vast majority of people who read it. We're gonna get to that. But there's always a but.
The husband, knowing God did that, could have followed God's word and not taken a second wife. He did have.
No,
some
no,
control over
wait,
that.
well, I need to pause on that. The husband could have followed God's word and not taken a second wife, knowing that. God's word doesn't say don't take a second wife. God's word says have as many wives as you want, have as many children as you can.
Oh. Well, then God got her.
That was their
Well, then God got her into this mess, Chris says as a conclusion. Yeah, so we got to be careful about what our concept of biblical marriage is back here. We're in the Old Testament.
Okay.
There never is really a switch to say from now on, shouldn't do that. It's more of a cultural shift. But the problem that we have with multiple wives in the Old Testament is not that it goes against God's law. It's usually because problems happen when, believe it or not, there's jealousy and competition among people when you try and split relationships. Yeah, it doesn't really always work, right? So let's move on to the next verses because we're going to keep understanding what's going on here. Would somebody be willing to read verses 9 through 16 for us?
I'll give it a try.
Chris will
There's
give it a
not
try.
so
Thank
many.
you, Chris.
So Hannah rose up after they had eaten in Shiloh and after they had drunk. Now Eli, the priest, sat upon a seat by a post of the temple of the Lord. And she was in bitterness of soul and prayed unto the Lord and wept sore. And she vowed a vow and said, O Lord of hosts, if thou wilt indeed look on the affliction of thy handmaiden and remember me, and not forget thine handmaid, but will give unto the handmaid a man child, then I will give him unto the Lord all the days of his life, and shall no razor come upon his head. Let me keep reading.
So 16, please. Yeah.
And it came to pass, as she continued praying before the Lord, that Eli marked her mouth. Now Hannah, she spake in her heart, only her lips moved, but her voice was not heard. Therefore Eli thought she had been drunken. And Eli said unto her, how long wilt thou be drunken? Put away thy wine from thee. And Hannah answered and said, no, my Lord, I am a woman of a sorrowful spirit. I have drunk neither wine nor strong drink, and have poured out my soul before the Lord. Count be thine handmaiden for a daughter of Bilal, for out of the abundance of my complaint and grief have I spoken hereto.
Thank you, Chris. I think we got the King James version there. Yeah.
Yes.
Some language that definitely is a little foreign to our ears, but we probably get the idea of what's going on. So what does Hannah do about her problem? What does this lead us to believe about her understandings of the cause of the problem?
I think she feels that God was the one who closed her womb, and she's appealing to him and ready to give over. She's just pouring her heart out to God in faith.
So Debbie says she seems to understand that God is the one who closes her womb. She pours her heart out and is ready to give herself over, but also her child, makes a pledge. If you give me a child, I'll
Yeah.
dedicate this child, consecrate, separate this child out for you. A lot of translations say he will be a Nazirite, which is the idea that he's not going to shave or drink wine his whole life. Sometimes people did that during a certain period of time. Samson famously was a Nazirite, but
I'm sorry. That's why mine says you should never cut his hair.
should never cut his hair. Yeah. So this was a pledge that you never cut your hair, never cut your beard, never drink wine.
You know, this could be her latest prayer.
This could be her latest prayer.
She could have been doing this every month for 15 years. And
Could have been doing this.
This was her latest. Okay, God, I'll do this. This time I will promise this.
So this could have been the culmination of prayer. So she might have been praying a prayer like this for years. And this finally was the one where she said, listen, I'll give the baby to you. I'll dedicate the baby to you if you give me a child. That's interesting, Pat. I want to pause here to note this is going to be something I think about in the sermon, I think. But Hannah doesn't go to church very often in our lingo. She worships now and again at festivals. It is not easy for Hannah to go to worship. She's given a double portion, she doesn't eat it. Because she can't even eat because she's confronted with what's going on when she goes to worship. I think that's something, a detail we sometimes pass by a little bit, but it's one that as a pastor, that happens a lot. Where we hope that worship is a place of comfort, but too often for some people, it's a place of confrontation. Not with other people, although for Hannah it was that too, but just with God, with, you know, when going to worship brings tears rather than comfort. I think of people who've lost a loved one who used to worship with them all the time, and they just can't sit in a pew without noticing the absence of the person next to them. Again, it happens from a pastor's perspective. We see it far more often than we'd like to. But it's human. How could you not? You know, these so often for some people, worship is a place of comfort that's been instilled in them over the years. For other people, worship is a place of feeling, you know, if you have a bad experience with your parents or with a leader in the church, worship can be a place of feeling confronted or a bad experience. So just as some of us are comforted by simply walking in a sanctuary, some folks avoid it like the plague because of the experiences they've had. And to think that Anna is taken to this festival where everybody's drinking and eating, and all she can do is feel grief.
Yeah, wow. And every time she goes to the festival, and probably times in between, she keeps praying this, but she doesn't get an answer. And it's, you know, and if you think how you feel, if you, you know, just, you know, you're pouring your heart out to God and you're pouring your heart out to God, but you don't see an answer, it is so easy to be discouraged.
So when you're pouring your heart out, Debbie says, to God, and you don't get an answer, and it might be going for years with Hannah,
Yeah,
how can you not become discouraged?
right.
Let's keep reading, or let's keep working through here. If you were Hannah, do you think you would have reacted in a similar or a different way than she does? So she kind of removes herself from the festivities and goes into the sanctuary to pray. Do you think that would have been your go-to, or do you think maybe not?
Living in those times.
Yeah, maybe living in those times, Chris, or maybe living now.
Oh, I wouldn't have gone to the festival.
You wouldn't have gone to the
No.
festival.
I'm talking about now, but that's a
Yeah,
whole different
that's a whole
thing
different thing.
of women.
I think I would have, you know, like back then, because just to sit around and watch all that is even more depressing. So just remove yourself someplace quiet and just,
So Debbie says removing yourself to someplace quiet might be the only sanctuary you get from that festival of everybody
Right.
celebrating that kind of thing.
What I find interesting in this is that the way I read it, Hannah does something that I would say I have done. I'm not going to speak for anybody else.
So Chris says Hannah does something that you have done. You don't want to speak
Yes.
for anybody else.
Yes, and that is to make a final commitment to God. If you will only do X, I will do Y. And as I say, I'm only speaking for myself, but I know of other people who, in times of illness, in times of financial problems, in times of things, make that deal with God. If you'll only do X, I will do something that is so important to me that I can push you into doing what I want you to do.
So Chris says, I don't want to lighten what you're saying, but it kind of bargaining with God. Is that accurate, Chris?
Yeah.
So if you do this, I will do this. If you do X, I'll do Y. So this Hannah's response is kind of okay, God, let's have it out. Here, listen, if you do this for me, I will do this for you.
And she picks the most important deal to make with God
She picks the most important deal for her
to get her out of this mess.
to get her out of the mess.
You know, I don't think you can make deals.
Do you think Hannah's trying to make a deal? Joyce says she doesn't think you can make deals. Phil says, yeah.
I think she's trying to state her case.
She's trying to state her case, Joyce. Okay, yeah.
I mean, I don't know that it's a deal.
I would say it's a promise.
It's a promise,
And
okay.
that's kind of a little different than a deal.
That's different than a deal, okay. A promise, but it's a conditional promise.
Is it?
Because you
Yes.
have to give me the son first before I can dedicate the son.
Right, but think of the promise she makes. I mean, you know, she could have made any kind of nice little promise. Like, she makes a promise to give him to God. And that, you know, she's turning him over.
She's gonna
That
turn
she's
him
not even
over
gonna
to God.
keep him.
She's not even gonna keep her son.
I mean, yeah, you saw me, so I have a whole slew of questions.
Yeah. Phil has a whole slew of
Weren't
questions.
the firstborn sons always given to God?
I'm sorry?
Weren't the firstborn sons always?
Were the firstborn sons always given to God? No. So the priests of the temple are Levites. They're only from a certain clan, which makes us think that Elkanah was part of that clan because his son wouldn't have gotten to go into, even now, before the temple. We're just talking about sanctuaries. The temple doesn't exist. We still think the Levites are the priests. They have always been the priests. So you have to be kind of part of that. And if that's the case, all your sons are dedicated. We're thinking of medieval Europe where like the first goes into the inheritance and the second goes into the priesthood. That's not the case here.
Now, do we know that this was a sacrifice of Thanksgiving or was it a guilt sacrifice? I don't
Well,
know.
so Bill brings up a good point. Was it a guilt sacrifice or a sacrifice of Thanksgiving? A sin offering, a guilt sacrifice, would not have been returned to the family to eat. That's burned. So a sacrifice of Thanksgiving is when you eat the meat that you sacrificed. You would not have corrupted yourself with the meat of a guilt sacrifice. Great question. Most of us don't even see that there's two different kinds of sacrifices. So that's a great question.
And is this a festival as we think of a festival, or is this just a religious observance?
Is it a festival as we think of a festival? Or is it a religious observance? I don't think you can separate the two at that time. So I think it's a religious observance, but here's why I think it's a festival in the way we think it's a festival. What does Eli think Hannah's doing?
Drinking, getting drunk.
He thinks she's drunk. Why?
Because they're partying.
Because he's seen it before. I would never think that somebody was coming into my sanctuary drunk unless I was used to seeing people come into my sanctuary drunk. If I saw somebody sitting in there praying by themselves, my first reaction would not be, wow, they must have been drinking. But it must have been at the festival time, not too uncommon, because Eli all of a sudden sees, we got this woman murmuring in the corner. She must have lost her way. Lady, did you lose your family? What are you doing? You know, a little too much to drink?
Yeah, because mine says must you come here drunk?
Must you come here drunk? He so this is assuming things, we have to admit, but it seems interesting to me that Eli automatically assumes that. So that makes me think that the festival and the religious observance are one in the same, right?
He tells her to throw away your bottle.
Your translation says throw away your bottle. Yeah, that's good. Throw away your bottle, lady. Yeah, that's mine's not as direct as that, but he says put away your wine. Stop making how long will you make a drunken spectacle of yourself is my translation. That's pretty straightforward, pretty harsh. Jump into some conclusions there. So we've covered what vow does Hannah make in her prayers. We understand that she's going to offer the baby to God, and how does Eli react? Something about negotiations with God, we'll call them. Famously, just a couple weeks ago, we were thinking about Martin Luther, and his whole story is a bargain with God. He got thrown from his horse in a storm, and the story goes, he himself told the story that he prayed to St. Anne saying, if you get me through this storm, I'll become a monk. And his dad was really ticked because he was supposed to be a lawyer for the family business. And he got through the storm and he became a monk. One of my mentors, the story goes, was at kind of a revival type meeting. And he said, well, God, I'm going to open my hymn book. And if that's the next hymn we sing, then I'm going to become a minister. And he opened the hymnal, and the minister announced that hymn as the next hymn that they were going to sing. So he became a minister. I think there were other things that were driving him, but these ideas of agreements or bargains or pledges to God, they're not as uncommon as we might think in some ways. How does Hannah help him understand what's going on, and what doesn't she tell him?
See, going back to the bargain, I mean, my translation says, she goes, I was just pouring my heart out to the Lord.
So Joyce's translation says she was pouring her, she tells Eli, I was just pouring my heart out to the Lord.
She doesn't give him all the details of what she's praying about. She's just telling him how strongly she's praying.
So Debbie says she doesn't give him all the details. She just talks about how strongly. I would argue, Debbie, she gives him none of the details.
Right. Sure. Yes.
Because if we read this, she doesn't say anything to Eli about what she's praying about.
Right.
Just that I am not drunk. I haven't even had a glass.
Right.
I am here praying.
And then later on, mine says, the Lord remembers her petition.
Joyce, we haven't gotten there yet. The Lord remembers her petition. We haven't read that part yet, Joyce. So let's read that part, Hannah. Yeah, or Anna, sorry. Anna has a question about it.
In the last phrase, it says, out of my great anguish and grief, she explains to
Out of my great anguish and grief that she's been doing this. So she tells Eli where it's coming from. And it's not motivated by the joy of the festival. I'm here because of my anguish and grief. Whew, that's.
Mine says great anxiety and vexation.
Anxiety and vexation. Anguish, grief, anxiety, vexation, reasons to come and pour your heart out to God. I'm going to read this last part, verses 17 through 20. Then Eli answered, "Go in peace. The God of Israel grant the petition you've made to him." And Hannah said, "Let your servant find favor in your sight." Then the woman went to her quarters, ate and drank with her husband, and her countenance was sad no longer. They rose early in the morning and worshiped before the Lord, and then they went back to their house at Ramah. Elkanah knew his wife Hannah, and the Lord remembered her. In due time, Hannah conceived and bore a son. She named him Samuel, for she said, "I have asked him of the Lord." How does Eli ultimately respond to Hannah? He says, "Go in peace." And he blesses her with a blessing on the way.
Tells her, may God grant her prayers.
May God grant your petitions, right? Your prayers. So
But he doesn't know what that is.
he doesn't know what it is. So was it important or not that Hannah explained her problem to Eli? And how might that be a model for us?
It was only important that she talked to God. You don't need a mediator.
Knock Chris out of a job.
Yeah.
You don't need a mediator. No, I agree with Joyce. Because Eli's still important in this.
Right.
I think it teaches us that you don't have to know all the facts. Sometimes that's just gossip.
Right.
You see someone in anguish, they don't necessarily need you to know their life story.
He did give her counsel.
He gave her counsel. Well, he told her to drop the wine. She told him, "That's not the counsel I need. You're wrong." He says, "Okay, well, now that I understand, I hope that God grants your petition."
He gives her encouragement.
He encourages her, right?
Yeah.
Even without knowing the details.
I think he sees, being who he is, that how strongly she is praying to God. He knows that this is a very important thing going on between her and God, and he's just going to support her.
He can tell it's important. He's just going to support her.
Right. Not going to tell her what to do or anything, just be there, and may God grant you your
May God grant your petition. And the interesting thing is, Eli finds all about why Hannah was there, because he raises Samuel.
Yes.
So he finds out the whole story.
Right.
But maybe this is a nice little model of showing us that you don't always need to know everything going on with somebody to support somebody in need or anguish or vexation or grief. Sometimes it's okay just to come alongside them and offer them comfort.
And does it also say that even though you go to God earnestly in prayer for something, that you don't always get the answer you expected, but that it's the answer at that time that God wants to give? And there comes a time when a prayer will be answered the way you expected.
Okay, that's a lot to unpack. So Chris says, does it help us to understand that even when you go to God earnestly in prayer, sometimes God doesn't answer the prayer the way you expect at that time,
Right.
but that maybe there will be a time where that prayer is answered. That's the crux of the sermon on Sunday, so I don't want to get too far into it today,
Okay.
because that's what we call a tease in the biz.
I wasn't.
No. This is the question that I struggle with, Chris, to be totally frank. What is this teaching us? Because if it's teaching us that when, if at first you don't succeed, pray again.
Well, Jesus has a parable about, the guy that shows up at his neighbor's house at 2:00 in the morning and knocks on the door. "Hey, I just had visitors, give me some bread." And he keeps knocking and knocking and knocking until the neighbor finally succumbs. So that's.
Jesus has a parable. He says
persistent.
that even if your neighbor doesn't want to give you the bread just to shut you up, he'll give it to you. So it is with my Father. You know, it's like, I appreciate the instruction on being purposeful and diligent in prayer. I also know what it's like to pray for a child.
This is kind of off in that, but this is one of the things I've struggled with. That I was having a hard time when you read in the Bible, you know, ask and you shall receive, and you know, and you get all these different things where if you pray to God, you will get your answer. And I keep thinking, you know.
Go ahead. No, I want to hear what you're going to say, Debbie.
No, I'm trying to think. They're screwing with my mind.
They're screwing with my mind. That's right.
Because God doesn't always answer.
God doesn't always answer.
Or it may,
But you don't know.
well, but if you read that as a new Christian, ask and you shall receive, I'm thinking, okay, I want this, and oh, it's gonna come, and it's gonna come soon, and it's gonna come the way I want it to.
No,
But,
yes, you receive, but you don't know what you're gonna receive.
Well,
but as a new Christian, you don't understand that, and I found, you know, and it used to confuse me a lot, you know, until, you know, I just learned to accept the word as it says. And that you know, it's not going to be answered the way you want all the time. It's not going to be answered when you want it to be answered. And but your faith is what's going to keep you going. And that's a very hard lesson.
so Debbie has some really important things here. So especially as a new Christian,
Yeah.
to hear ask and you shall receive, this, it can lead you to believe you're not doing it right if you're not getting what you're asking for, right? So
Yeah.
you didn't say that, I'm adding that, Debbie. I hope you agree with me on that,
Yeah.
right? So the idea that it takes some either maturity or being jaded enough to know to say, yeah, it doesn't always work out the way you're supposed to, but the spiritual maturity comes in and saying, but that doesn't mean God isn't listening.
Right.
And it doesn't mean my request isn't a good one.
Right.
It's just that it doesn't always work the way that I petition, even if I'm pouring my heart out in anguish.
Right.
Though we're gonna, sorry, I didn't mean to hear you.
No, but do you ever hear people, you know, well, I asked and God didn't answer, so I gave up. You know, you hear that. And that's when you have to try to encourage someone, you know, and give them, you know.
Don't lose faith just
don't
because
lose
you,
faith
yeah,
just
yeah,
because
yeah.
of that. But I think that's.
It's different. It's a real, it's a real life thing that people go
Yeah.
through. Absolutely, Debbie, I agree. But I want to get to you. I don't want to cut anybody off.
No, I've read a lot of commentary about people saying, well, you didn't pray right.
You didn't pray right. Yeah.
Even Job, who prayed for relief all the time, and then someone said, well, he prayed for himself, not for.
So even commentary on Job, he prayed for himself. He didn't pray for others. That's why his prayers were an answer.
That the prayer was not the right way, was not done the right way. And here, Jesus says again, that whatever you ask from the Father, he will give it to you in my name. That sounds pretty absolute to me.
Whatever you ask from the Father, he will give it to you in my name. It does sound pretty absolute. Whatever.
He will give it to you.
I know.
So he's not asking you will receive something.
So this is really the heart of the passage for me. I'm not mad at Hannah for getting the son she wants. But I also know that's a tough message to preach to myself, let alone anybody else in the congregation. Because if you're not getting what you're asking for, it must be you. Right? So
Right, that's the way.
Joyce says no, she doesn't think of it that way.
I have done.
I'm putting it out there. I'm putting it out there. I'm not preaching that. Don't worry about it. You're not going to hear that from the pulpit on Sunday. Joyce, let me hear a little bit about what your concerns.
I don't know, I just think, I mean, goodness knows I pray 24/7. Seems like I'm always talking to God. And it's like, we don't always know what's best for us.
No.
And you have to just You have to believe that we could ask for the moon, but he would say, no.
So we don't always know what's best for us. I agree that we come to that understanding, Joyce, but I'm not sure it's easy to start there sometimes. Okay, we could talk about this for a long time. We're already over by a minute or two, but I'm glad this comes up and that this is stirring us up, because this is what, when I read this passage, I thought, oh, there's some stuff there. And it's not in the story of Samuel, it's in the story of Hannah's prayer and what's going on.
Now, maybe I feel that way because I've never had a major problem in my life. You know what I'm saying? I've never had something that I really wanted, I guess.
And didn't get.
That I didn't.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, well, good. That's a helpful realization, Joyce. That's good to know, right? So it's one thing to tell people, don't you worry, your prayers, you just keep praying. And you just say, well, yeah, I guess I can say that because there's nothing that's ever not come for me, right? So as someone who's prayed for things that haven't happened, that's not advice I can give to somebody out of my own perspective.
Slinky, but I didn't get that.
Right, well, you want to sleep, you didn't get that.
But you know what I'm saying?
No, yeah, the things that matter, yeah, sure.
But God
Chris.
is timeless.
God is timeless.
So I believe, and this is just purely on faith, I believe that something I pray for will happen. I just may not live to see it.
Chris says she believes that what her prayers will be answered, she just might not live to see it. I appreciate the perspective, Chris. I like that. I like that answer. That's good. I just want to summarize a few of the questions at the end here. What change happens for Hannah? She immediately goes back after Eli offers this support. She eats and participates in the festival for the first time.
She feels peace.
She feels at peace. That's incredible. She's no longer downcast. Her countenance is raised.
Relaxed.
She's relaxed. All of a sudden.
Have dinner with her husband.
She has dinner with her husband, yeah. And how do we hear Hannah's prayers answered? Her husband knew her. That's an innuendo for those of us who read that and say like, well, yeah, of course he knew her. He married her. Like, no, this is taking this passage. This is the question we've just been talking about. So I just want us to look at that. Taking this passage and this passage only, what might it teach us about problems we have and how to solve them? That's what we've been talking about. Like if this is our model for how to fix something in your life, say, oh, well, Hannah did that and that's what I have to do. And that's how it'll change. That's how it'll end up for me too. Well, maybe, but maybe as Chris says, your prayers are going to be answered long after you're gone to see them. We don't know. We don't know that.
I think too, in praying, if myself or anyone is considering making a promise to God, you better be willing to keep it, because God's not going to take your promise lightly.
If you're willing to make if you're considering making a promise to God, make sure you plan to actually uphold it, because God doesn't take that lightly. That's a good, I like that. That's a good statement, Debbie. I like that to think about as we depart. My question for you as you go.
Anna has.
Oh, Anna, sorry. Thank you.
Well, the last question is very interesting. How is it faith impacted? You know, when you don't get an answer, when things aren't resolved.
When God doesn't answer your prayers the way you
Right.
expect to see them, how is your faith impacted? This is one that I want us to be thinking about. And that's what I want to talk about on Sunday, as we talk about Stewardship Sunday and being thankful. Is it transactionary? So does our thanksgiving come from what we've been given? Or is it conditional on God giving us something for us to return thanks? Is the question I want us to think about. I don't have an answer for you right now on that one. I'm not sure I have an answer for you anyway, but that's one I want us to think about as we depart today. So thank you all. Great discussion today, especially about prayer and just real life situations all of us have surely been through, and how our faith plays a part in that or doesn't, right? So Go in peace. Hope to see you again next week. Rick will be here to lead us. Take care, everybody at home. Glad to see you all today.
Yep.